You're listening to Boomers Today with your host, Frank Sampson.
Well, welcome to Boomers Today. I'm your host, Frank Sampson. Of course, each week we bring you important and very useful information on issues facing baby boomers, their parents, and other loved ones. And we, of course, we're not going to disappoint you today. We got another great guest, which is why our listeners are growing each and every day. Many of you are listening to the show on your favorite podcast app, many on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and some of you go to our website at boomerstodayradio.com. So we appreciate all your support and sharing the information with friends and family. We really appreciate it. As I say, we're not going to disappoint you today. We have another great guest with us. Her name is Sharona Hoffman, and she is the author of Aging with a Plan: How a Little Thought Today Can Vastly Improve Your Tomorrow. She is a professor of law and bioethics at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and is co-director of the Law's Law Medicine Center. Prior to becoming an academic, Ms. Hoffman was a senior trial attorney at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission in Houston, a litigation associate at O'Melveny and Myers in Los Angeles, and a judicial clerk for U.S. District Judge Douglas W. Hillman in the Western District of Michigan, my home state. Professor Hoffman has published over 70 articles and books, chapters on health law and civil rights issues, as well as 2 books, which we're going to be talking about. Her work has appeared in the Georgetown Law Journal, Harvard Journal of Law and Technology, Yale Journal of Health Policy, Law and Ethics, and many other publications. In 2021, Professor Hoffman won the Case Western Reserve Faculty Distinguished Research Award. And in 2016, she won the Case Western Reserve University School of Law Distinguished Research Award. Professor Hoffman has lectured throughout the United States and internationally, and has very frequent appearances in local, national, and international media. So, Professor Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us on Boomers Today.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, that's I could have gone on and on, but we had to have time for the podcast. You have a wonderful background. Yeah. So maybe we could just start out, because I'm an author too, and people always ask me, what was the catalyst of writing your book? So I'm going to ask you, what was the catalyst of writing your book?
The catalyst actually was a lot of personal experience that made me have to think through a lot of issues. So in 2013 and 2014, I had 18 months during which both of my parents died, and my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. So I had a lot of challenges come up. I had to do a lot of caregiving, and the book was sort of just organically born. So I had one edition of it that came out in 2015, and now so much has changed. I've decided to update and revise the book, and this is a new, completely redone edition.
Great. And it just came out? The new edition just came out?
It was just published in January. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. And who do you think obviously you'd like to have everybody read it, but who do you think is the key target for that would really benefit by getting and reading your book?
So it's designed in part for people who are middle-aged. All that stuff happened to me when I was in my late 40s. And so people who should be planning ahead for caregiving and for their own aging, And it's also designed for seniors who may not have all their plans in place. So I say it's really for people who are middle-aged and beyond.
Got it. Okay, good. So speaking about plans, I see, and I went to your website, and I see quite clearly that you advocate building sustainable legal, social, medical, financial, and other support systems for aging. Somebody who just heard me say that, they're probably thinking, "Whoa, that's a lot," So, where do you think someone should start? Let's just say whether it be a senior, whether it be an adult child whose loved one maybe didn't plan and they're helping to get things going. What are your thoughts?
First of all, a good place to start is reading this book. It's pretty accessible. It's only about 250 pages, and it really covers all of those areas. But an important thing is to get your legal documents in order, or make sure your loved one has the legal documents that they're going to need. So consulting an elder law attorney or an estate planning attorney is really, really important, because if you don't have the correct legal documents, it can cause you a lot of problems in terms of finances and getting medical care and getting your assets distributed the way you want. So that's a big step. You also want to make sure that you are saving for retirement and doing it wisely. So you want to consult a financial advisor if you can afford to do that. And if you can't, there are also some that do it pro bono that don't charge a lot of money. And so having your finances in place is important. And the advice that the experts give, for example, is if you have to choose between paying a lot of tuition for your kids or saving for retirement, you should actually prioritize saving for retirement, because your kids can get loans, and there aren't loans for retirement that you can get. So a lot of it is just knowing what to anticipate and consulting the correct experts about it.
Let's zero in. I mean, that's great. Let's zero in on some of that. Legal documents. I mean, we talk about this quite often on the show, but as I say, we can't talk about it enough because it's so important. But if you were to pick maybe top 3, let's say, legal documents, certainly we can mention the others, but that you think's worthy of discussing a little bit more, what would you say?
Right. So you need to have decision makers in place, both for healthcare and for finances. Unfortunately, a lot of people lose the capacity to make their own decisions, not only at the end of life, but they'll develop dementia, sometimes years or even decades before the end of life. And so there has to be somebody who can make decisions, who can write checks, who can take care of the finances. So you need to have a power of attorney, it's called, for healthcare. So somebody is making healthcare decisions for you, and you have to have a power of attorney for property and finances. So somebody can take over writing checks, dealing with your bills, making sure you have enough money to pay for your expenses. So those are really the top 2, and I have a lot of advice about how to choose your decision makers carefully. You may also want to have a living will so that you're providing the healthcare decision maker with instructions. Would you want a lot of aggressive treatment to prolong life, like a ventilator and artificial nutrition and hydration? Or would you want to just get comfort care and not prolong the dying process, and a variety of other guidance that you can provide? And of course, you want to have a will, especially if you don't want all your money to just go to your spouse and children. You want to give some money to charity or to other loved ones. You need to have those instructions in a will. So I would say those are the most important documents.
Great. I'd like to talk a little more detail about a couple of them. Power of attorney, number one. I think that there's an assumption out there by many that, well, if you're married, your spouse will make the decisions if you can't make them. And that's not correct. Is that right?
Sometimes it's correct, but you can't count on that. First of all, a lot of people do this once and then they forget about it and they're divorced and they don't update their documents. So it's really important to update your documents. At least once every 10 years, look at them, but also if there's something important that happens like a divorce or a change in your health status or so on. And you have to take into account the possibility, that's why I say aging with a plan. You have to plan for the possibility that your spouse will either predecease you or develop dementia themselves. And so it's really important to name an alternate in all of your documents. My first choice is my husband, let's say, but if he's unavailable or incapacitated, my sister or my child or whoever.
Right. So I know the answer to this one, but I want to ask you so people really understand. If they don't have a power of attorney, and let's just say they develop dementia or some other disease where they cannot make decisions anymore, what happens?
Right. So a variety of things can happen, and it depends on what kind of care. If it's emergency care, you go to the emergency room and are having a heart attack, people will give you care, and they're not going to wonder about whether you have the correct documents or not. The question comes if it's more elective surgery, a knee replacement or something that is not emergency care, then you really need a decision maker. In a lot of states, the state law will say who the decision makers will be and in what order, the spouse, the child, the sibling. But sometimes doctors will just not want to provide the care unless there is a decision maker appointed through a legal document. And so you can get some pushback. There's some procedure that might alleviate pain or make you more comfortable. And the doctor might say, well, we're going to wait until there's a guardian appointed by law before we're going to do this procedure. So emergency care is not a problem. Sometimes state law will tell you, who the decision makers will be. It might be someone you don't want. It might be a spouse that you're not getting along with. But sometimes just you can't actually get the medical care unless there's a legal process, such as appointment of a guardian.
So on the power of attorney, and again, I'm only bringing this up because I've had firsthand experience with families that I've worked with. And they maybe try to save a few dollars and calling an elder law attorney like you recommended, and I absolutely recommend as well. But they go online, they Google it, they Google power of attorney template, and they put in their state, and they're going to find a template there. Okay. What are your thoughts there on those situations?
Right. So a lot of states, including Ohio, actually have pretty good templates. And if you don't have money for an attorney, that is far better than doing nothing. Download it and fill it out. For some things, you need advice because some parts of it ask you to check boxes. Would you want this type of care? Would you not want that type of care? And you need to talk to someone to explain to you what you're doing. Because if you mark boxes sort of without a lot of thought, that could determine your care in the future. And I have certainly run into this where people have very advanced dementia and the families are doing all kinds of very aggressive care that's probably pretty uncomfortable, and it's because somebody checked a box, probably without thinking about it. I do not recommend that people fill out wills from boilerplate documents on the internet, because for a will, you probably do want to get some advice about asset distribution and so on. So it depends on the documents, and if it's just a matter of naming a decision maker, I want my son to be the decision maker or my sister, it's better to fill that out from a document you downloaded from the web than not do it at all.
Great. Well, good. Great advice. So we're going to take a real quick break here. I promise, just about 30 seconds, just to recognize our sponsor. And we come back. We're going to talk to Professor Hoffman about maybe what expenses should you anticipate as you move into the retirement years, and what's the best way to save for them. So when we come back, we'll address that with her. So my question to you is, do you know anybody who may be concerned about an older driver? Well, Senior Care Authority's Beyond Driving with Dignity program is a facilitated self-assessment program for older drivers. This program has been designed to serve as a vital tool to facilitate older drivers and their families as they make appropriate decisions regarding the future of one's safe driving career. If the individual is a safe driver, an advisor will provide him or her with strategies on how to remain a safe driver as they progress through the aging process. If driving retirement is the appropriate decision, then the individual and their family are offered possible alternatives, resources, and a specific plan to ensure a smooth and successful transition from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. So to learn more, you can go to www.beyonddrivingwithdignity.com or call 877-907-8841, and you could connect with a Senior Care Authority advisor in your area. We are back with Professor Sharona Hoffman, who is the author of Aging with a Plan: How a Little Thought Today Can Vastly Improve Your Tomorrow. Great title, by the way. Love your title. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as it relates to kind of planning for retirement and expenses that may incur and saving for them, help us. You know what? Before we do that, I want to make sure that people know how to get your book, and if they want to even get in touch with you at all. So before we get into that question, why don't you just share with our listeners how they can do that?
Yeah, the book is available on Amazon. It's paperback. So just Google it, make sure that you put in second edition, because there's an outdated first edition. And I think on Amazon, it's $25.99, but there are options that are cheaper. So Amazon is probably your best way to get it. And you can just look me up on the internet, and my email and work phone number come up.
Great. Okay, good. So now let's go back to expenses to anticipate as you're moving into retirement years and saving for them. What help us with that?
Yeah, so expenses, you need to understand that even if you live a modest lifestyle and you don't take a cruise twice a year, you're going to have significant expenses. The figure that I read is that a couple that is currently 65 and is going to live to their anticipated longevity, around 80 or so, can anticipate paying $300,000 just for medical costs, out-of-pocket medical costs, because there are a lot of things that aren't covered, such as hearing aids or psychotherapy. And even if you have Medicare and good supplemental insurance, there are co-pays, co-insurance, deductibles, and so on. So So that's hundreds of thousands just for pretty routine medical care. And then if you're going to need long-term care, such as nursing homes, assisted living, an in-home aide to come, that is hundreds of thousands of dollars more. I think a single room in a nursing home on average is about $100,000 a year, and an aide just per hour is $23.50 per hour on average in the United States, and that racks up really quickly. So you have to prioritize saving. And a great way to do that is through any employers programs that you have, pension programs, health savings accounts. So talk to your HR department. And if you can afford a financial advisor, that is a really good thing to do as well.
Yeah, so I was debating whether to ask this question or not, but I'm going to ask it. And because we could do a whole show just on this one subject, but maybe you could give us a little overview of kind of the Medicare, Medicaid, because I know when you were talking about the cost of home care and the cost of assisted living and the cost of nursing. Well, in some states, it's possible, especially on the nursing side, that Medicaid could be paying for that. But there is a perception out there that, which it's true, you kind of have to almost be down to your last pennies, all right? But I know that there are ways legally to either get on a Medicaid program. Again, varies on the state. And again, maybe you could address that and also address Medicare, because a lot of people, until they dig into it, they think, well, doesn't Medicare cover my assisted living? So can you address that?
Sure, and I'll try to be brief.
Yeah, saying we could do it. We could do a show just on that subject matter. I realize.
So, first of all, it's important to clarify Medicare is the program for older adults, 65 and over, though they do cover some disabled people. Medicaid is for people who are economically disadvantaged, and it's been expanded by Obamacare, but you have to be pretty close to the poverty line to qualify for that. Medicare does not cover long-term care very much. If it's rehab, if you've had a surgery or an illness and you have to go to a nursing home for rehab, they will cover a certain number of days, I think up to 100 days, though they don't cover all of it for 100 days. And then you're on your own. So if you have to live in a nursing home long-term, they will not cover that. They do not cover assisted living or in-home aides that are helping you with activities of daily living, though again, if you've had surgery or an injury, they may cover a nurse to come to your home for a period of time to do wound care or change a catheter or whatever. Medicaid does pay for some nursing homes, though you don't get to pick them. They have to be Medicaid eligible, and a lot of people say those are not your top of the line nursing homes. And increasingly in some states, they will pay for assisted living or even in-home aides to come, at least to a limited extent. But yes, you do have to spend down your assets. So you have to have very little left for a single person. I think it's a residence and $2,000. And so you should not plan on that, unless you or your loved one really is impoverished. And, that's probably not something you want to hope for and plan for, is to go on Medicaid. So you do need to understand that long-term care is generally not going to be covered by those public insurance programs. A whole different topic is whether you should get long-term care insurance. I do address that in some detail in the book. It's a complicated decision because it's very, very expensive, and it limits coverage in different ways that can be problematic. But there is that option of long-term care insurance that, again, you should discuss with a financial advisor.
Actually, if I could add something on the long-term care insurance, because we've had, experts in the field on it, there's kind of these hybrid policies now where they're kind of combining the long-term care insurance and life insurance, whereby depending, obviously, if hopefully you go through life and you don't need the long-term care, then you got your life insurance policy. If you need long-term care, then it might eat into your life insurance benefits. And it seems like a lot of those plans, at least what I've seen, I don't know what you've seen, but are a little more affordable if you're incorporating your life insurance with it.
Right. So a lot of people like that option, the hybrid option, because your beneficiaries will get the money back if you end up not needing long-term care, though the growth isn't as great. The problem with that approach is that you have to pay upfront. So you have to, if you want one of those hybrid policies, you generally have to pay $50,000 or whatever upfront to purchase it. So it's not something that you just pay bits of every month or every year.
Right. So we just, we have a few minutes left, but a real important subject matter is end of life care. So talk to us about the options that exist for end of life care. How does one make sure that their wishes will be followed?
Yeah, so end of life care, it is very important to think about that and to have discussions with your family members, your loved ones, about that, as unpalatable as that might seem. So what you run into often is, do you want very aggressive treatment? If they can't make you better, but they could prolong your life by giving you chemotherapy or giving you a feeding tube or putting you on a ventilator, they could prolong life, but you'd have a very low quality of life. Would you want that? And often you're not going to be in a position to make those decisions yourself. So you need a decision maker, and you need to have left some instructions. And sometimes there are religious considerations that come into that. Sometimes people's own sense of morality and ethics comes into that. And there are options. There's hospice in the last 6 months of life, where they are not going to be treating you to try to cure you. It's all going to be comfort care to try to make the last 6 months comfortable. Is that something that is appealing to you? Comfort care versus therapeutic care. In some states, I believe in about 10 jurisdictions, there is medical aid in dying, where you can get a physician to prescribe drugs that you can take to end your own life. Is that something that you would be interested in if you got a terrible diagnosis and could not get better? Would you want to consider assisted living if you live in one of those 10 jurisdictions? So there's a lot to think about, and it's much better to think about that in advance than to find yourself in the middle of a crisis having to make life and death decisions and you've never thought about it or educated yourself about it at all.
Professor Sharona Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us. You're a wealth of information. Check out her book, Aging with a Plan, How a Little Thought Today Can Vastly Improve Your Tomorrow, second edition. Go on Amazon, check it out. And I just, again, want to thank you so much for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I want to hang in there for a minute with me, Professor
Sure.
Hoffman. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Boomers Today. Please, please be safe. We'll talk to everybody.
You've been listening to Boomers Today with Frank Sampson. To learn more about today's show, visit boomerstodayradio.com and join us next time for another edition of Boomers Today.